Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by Jack Kane Ford. Find your next Ford Tough vehicle at caneford.com. Woodhill Community Center. Have a hand in the heart of the city. Support their mission with your donations at woodhillcommunitycenter.org. Toyota in Nicholasville Superstore. Online consultants are standing by right now to help you find your next Toyota. Visit toyotaonnicholasville.com. Lexus of Lexington, home of the best-selling Lexus IS. Find yours today at lexusoflexington.com. Introducing the redesigned CatholicSingles.com, featuring new ways that put the spotlight on the person and their faith, not just a profile picture. For the past 20 years, faithful Catholics have used CatholicSingles.com, and the reimagined CatholicSingles.com website is ready to help single Catholics take the next step in sharing meaningful relationships with other faithful Catholics. Remember, CatholicSingles.com for faith, fellowship, and love.
Friends, and welcome to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. I'm so happy to be back behind the microphone this week for another great podcast. And today we feature someone who's a friend in my real life and someone who's doing amazing work to help us kind of make our way through the maze of communications these days. Our guest today is Bill Schmitt, and Bill is an independent journalist and multimedia consultant with a vast amount of experience in academia, public affairs, business, science, education, and evangelization. He has authored 2 amazing books. Actually, we're here to talk about yet another book that's fresh out. Bill is the author of a newly released volume called When Headlines Hurt, Do We Have a Prayer? The Pope's Words of Hope for Journalism. And today, to kick off a conversation on all things communication, is my real-life friend, Bill Schmitt. Hi, Bill.
Hello, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be online with you.
Well, it's a real treat to have you, and I'm always a fan of your books. 2 of them, actually.
Thank you.
You know, sitting next to my bed, I have many, many books in my life, but some of the most special ones sit on the nightstand next to my bed, and that's where I keep any books that I have that are related to my alma mater, the University of Notre Dame, and 2 of your titles are right there on that bookshelf.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yes, those are 2 just tremendously enjoyable projects and great introductions to the world of book writing, and also further introductions into the world of Notre Dame that I appreciated. I was able to learn a lot about Notre Dame and its history and community by writing those, and now I'm trying to continue the book writing craft.
Well, awesome. So for friends who don't already know you, I know you're active in so many things. Tell us a little bit of your story, of Bill's story.
Well, originally a New Yorker and journalism student at Fordham, and then studied public affairs and public governance as a graduate student at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School, all with the goal of becoming a journalist covering public affairs. And that was indeed what I did for the first couple of decades of my life. On a more personal and important level, I was blessed to meet a fellow New Yorker, my wife Eileen. She's from upstate New York, while I'm from Long Island, but we met in Washington, D.C. because I had moved down there to cover government, and then in 2003, she and I and our daughter Mary, who's now a junior at CUA's business school, we all packed up the truck and we moved to Beverly. No, we moved to South Bend. And it was just a delightful adventure. I had wanted to move from secular journalism, even though I really enjoyed covering business and science and government's interaction with that, I wanted to make a bigger contribution to the Catholic world, and I also wanted to just get even broaden my horizons more in terms of communications. And so we've been here since 2003, flourishing in so many ways, and I've gotten a chance to do all sorts of communications work. My full-time employ at Notre Dame ended last year, and so now I'm in a kind of phase 3 of my career, and it's proven to be just a remarkable year. I believe it's been led by the Holy Spirit. At least I've been trying to respond to some very interesting opportunities, including podcasting and getting more involved with Catholic radio here in the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend, and doing things like this book, which was really a proactive effort on my part. So that everything has worked out so beautifully. Blessings hopefully geared toward my vocation as a journalist. By the way, I enjoyed your podcast with that gentleman. Was it Joshua Miller?
Yes.
Who talked about vocations. And boy, that resonated with me.
Well, I'm sure, because, I think anytime we find ourselves in new phases of life, that message that Josh Miller had for us, which is that, our lives are unrepeatable and that each of us have a calling. I love that you're in the process of discovering for yourself what a whole new part of your adventure will be. I ask often on this show, tell us a little bit of your story, because it's always interesting to me to hear, how people respond to that question, and certainly you've done so with faith and with family and also with your profession. I cannot believe that Mary is already in college. That's shocking.
I can't either.
Shocking to me. Shocking.
Yeah, she's going to be a senior next year, and right now she's in Chile doing a business internship. This is her, her foreign study experience, and she's loving that and getting immersed in the Spanish language, which I'm so delighted about, and she's thriving. So, and my wife is thriving in her work here. So, even though my life has changed a bit, I see God's handwriting on the whole thing, and I hope to keep writing in His script.
Well, it's amazing, and we're going to get into the book in a little bit. But as a trained journalist, I before we launch into the conversation about the book, one thing that strikes me about this work that we do, and I'm not a trained journalist, and I don't even call myself any kind of a journalist, but I think I am a communicator. And I came by that not through a formal education, but really through life circumstances. And it strikes me nowadays that just about all of us are communicators. And so every year we have this message from Pope Francis, the World Communications Day message. And about probably 7 or 8 years ago, I began to take those sort of as my personal marching orders from the Holy Father every year, because the topics that they take on are really so relevant to all of us, whether or not we are trained journalists or simply using Facebook to share our faith. So say a little bit about how the world of communications has changed since you first came into it as a professional journalist.
Oh, my goodness. It seems in some ways to be similar, but in some ways just different at a gut level, at that vocation level, at least personally. I'm sure lots of really great people are still going into the profession, although, as you say, the profession is so much more broadly defined nowadays. I know I went into it, partly because writing just seemed to be what I was meant to do from 6th grade. My Catholic grammar school on Long Island, which happened to be named Notre Dame, they let me do a school newspaper. starting in 6th grade, using that purple ink hexagraph machine that we probably remember from our youths, and so from that moment on, and then through high school and college, I was deeply involved in journalism because I really believed in journalism as a pursuit of truth and as a service thereby to the greater community and to the virtue and value of truth as a Catholic. Nowadays, it seems as though, obviously, there's still that pursuit, and there are so many more avenues to pursue truth, thanks to the digital media as well. It's not something that seems to be at the top of a lot of people's agendas that search for truth. I don't sense that it's being viewed quite as much as a vocation.
Well, the World Communications Day message for this year had an interesting and very timely topic. The title of it was "The Truth Will Set You Free: Fake News and Journalism for Peace," and it's really. Yes. It's really something that I think, we find that term fake news swirling around us. And even in the past, you might have tuned into, for example, a television news program to have what you might consider an unbiased take on the news. And yet we find now that there's just this real polemic environment for journalism that's cropping up all around us. So what inspired you to write your book, When Headlines Hurt, Do We Have a Prayer? Where did the book come from?
Well, it was a nice combination of a few things. One, it was just the general frustration with the state of our polarized society and what seemed to be, kind of short-circuited conversations about policy issues that have always mattered to me and certainly mattered to our country. So all of those things that I think so many of us share, even at a secular level. And then I've been increasingly interested in seeing how my communications work could really do the work of evangelization, Catholic evangelization, or as you rightly put it, missionary discipleship. That's exactly the Church's mission. And I'm a big believer in faith and reason, as the Catholic Church serves it up better than anyone else, being the cure for what ails us, because I'm afraid that a lot of the missteps we're making in the communications, journalism, and policy and cultural world stem from that. And so that urge for evangelization. And then the third crowning achievement was just the discovery of Pope Francis's message. I was writing a piece for Notre Dame magazine on something related, a book called Caring for Words, another book that I'd recommend highly, but that made me keenly aware that the 52nd World Communications Day message had just come out, and I eagerly read that. And the best part of it all was that Pope Francis ended his message with a paraphrase of the prayer that everybody loves and knows, and that I'm a lifetime professed member of the Secular Franciscan Order, and that's at the top of our hit parade, the what's called the Peace Prayer of Saint Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, etc. And he paraphrased that as part of the message, and I said, wow, this is a way for me to perhaps get into that very potentially contentious but certainly complicated world of talking about journalism and where we are as a society, because here's a world leader who's stepping up and saying, as a pastor, not as a pundit, But as a pastor, this is a problem. First of all, let's ask ourselves how we can solve some of the problems. And best of all, let's start with a prayer. And I just loved that. And I wanted to let people know that existed.
Well, I think as someone who's been reading those messages every year, they come out, it's an interesting thing. They're promulgated early, but they really are related to the feast day of St. Francis de Sales, who's the patron saint of communicators. And like I said, there's just a whole litany of reasons to read that every year. But this year, one of the things that really caught my attention about the message this year, and I'll try to find this so that I can share it in the show notes with the blog post, there was a very stunning rendition of that final prayer that was put together by Father Tom Rosica of Salt and Light TV in Canada. He had a video representation of that prayer with all different ethnicities and also different languages presenting that prayer. And it's only about a minute-long video, but it's really one of the most stunning pieces of video I've seen all year long. So you should definitely check it out.
I really am going to look for that.
Yeah,
and it's so much in keeping with, the tradition of popes and other Catholics gathering in Assisi in the spirit of St. Francis, from all over the world to pray for peace.
Yeah, and I don't think that most people who hear the word journalism this year, this at this time necessarily their mind does not reflexively go to the word peace.
No, that's right.
That word. But, I think most of us might not describe reading the news as peaceful. So setting aside, our call to be communicators, I'm curious about what you have to say for people who are just intakers of news and, how we can be people of faith and also people who pay attention to what's happening in the world around us these days.
It's important to realize that you are intaking news and that it can have a positive or negative effect. Some of that is your choice, but it should be a kind of purposeful consumption of news, I would say, and I think that's what the Pope is telling us. In fact, he uses great terms, urging people to be urging journalists to be protectors of news, and urging people in general to be to seek out an education for truth. He's really serious about all of us being participants in the dialogue about, is news valuable? Is it just something to entertain me? Is it just something to raise, broadcasters' ratings? Or am I really trying to pursue this, not as a spectator, but as a participant and someone who's going to follow up on what he or she is learning?
So this book is actually, I'd like to recommend it to folks both because it's impactful but slim. It's not a very lengthy read, and it's also very affordably priced. And you can get it today via Kindle through Amazon. So, what are some of the major components of the book?
Well, it starts out with a summary of the message and kind of just alerting people to the fact that this message does exist and has existed since Vatican II. And then it goes on to a discussion of the original Pope Francis, the peace prayer. And I do mention as an aside that we're not saying that this was originally written by Pope Francis. It's a much more modern prayer, but it's very much in the Franciscan spirit, and Pope Francis is obviously using it and praying it in very much a Franciscan spirit. And then the rest of the book is really just trying to savor the lines of this new peace prayer geared toward journalists, much as I've kind of committed myself to savor more consistently the lines of Peace Prayer version 1.0, as I playfully call it. The original is so filled with, wonderful ways that we can live the gospel, bring the gospel to life, and bring the life to gospel, as the secular Franciscans say.
Well,
those are the lines that I kind of try to reflect on and show a little bit of research about.
I love that, and I really enjoyed my reading of this book. Again, friends, the title of the book is When Headlines Hurt, and we'll definitely have a link in our show notes so you can get a hold of this and pick it up. I think it's an important topic. So, along with a careful reading of When Words Hurt, or When Headlines Hurt, excuse me, Bill, what kind of suggestions do you have for the average person on our use of social media and how, the promulgation of the information that we share online really does matter? What should we be doing as people of faith when we consume information in places like Facebook or Twitter?
Well, that's a very good question. And in the spirit of that kind of inclusive prayer, I would say that there's probably some instruction the Pope is offering us, both specifically to journalists and then to news consumers. But as you point out, nowadays, news consumers, there's a very fine line between people who consume the news and then repurpose it or regenerate it in social media, etc. So in a sense, we're all journalists in new ways. So, but for journalists in particular, I'd say the Pope is telling us to be protectors of truth and to consider journalism as an instrument for peace rather than for the weaponization of words and conversation. I think that's become much more aggressive and toxic than I remember journalism being. So he calls journalists protectors of truth and avoiding disinformation, because disinformation is not a victimless crime. Disinformation, when it becomes kind of assumed, for it's eroding trust on a massive scale such that nobody trusts each other. We don't have a meeting of minds possible that can lead us to broader conversations where people really feel comfortable to share their personal views and then act on policy issues. So journalists have those roles, and then for all of us, that's the term of education for truth, where we all have a duty to educate ourselves for truth, in the sense of not just, first of all, not just accepting the sad question, what is truth? Let's find out what truth is. The Catechism can tell us a lot, and Jesus can tell us an awful lot. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And truth is a person in a very real sense, so it's very concrete. And in a day of relativism, all of us owe it to the Lord and to our faith and to our society to take truth very seriously and to use it for discernment. What does this mean for what we should do next? What does it mean for humility that I should bring to the situation? How about judging other people in light of what I'm learning? And also, am I learning enough? Should I be asking more questions, reading more articles, not just settling for the buzzwords that they're just oftentimes strategically made in some back room of some lobbyist firm, I'm afraid, so many days. and then they get repeated, or they're slapped onto a tweet without any consideration, and they suddenly become news. And so I like to say that, our conversation is becoming newsjacked, instead of carjacking or hijacking. Don't let journalists just be the sole dictators of what news is, because oftentimes it's not even the journalists. They're doing their best often, but they're being handed these things, and we need to in a good way, challenge them and ask them, can't you do a little bit better? Can't you give us a little bit more? How about some context? How about some history behind the story, rather than just the fight and the feud of the particular day?
I think that's significant to point out to people, and as consumers of information. One thing that I was reminded of when you were speaking was a blogging platform, which is not Catholic Mom, but another place where I wrote in years past, where we writers were under tremendous pressure to increase the volume of visitors to our websites. And so we received special training on how to write particular headlines that would incite visits, and, how to use what's commonly referred to in the industry as clickbait. So,
clickbait.
That is because, unfortunately, in today's media world, quite often those page views or volume of visits to a website, which promotes then advertising funding, is at the bottom line of what gets communicated, and things rise up and fall down based on the number of eyes looking at it. So nobody necessarily wants to read, a 16-page article on a papal encyclical, but, you might write something sort of short and pithy with 3 bullet points and a catchy headline, and that gets all the views. So that's a new way of communicating, I think, and something that challenges us, like you said, to go to a deeper level, not just to accept what's on the surface level. Your headline, your title of your book, When Headlines Hurt, it makes me think of the feeling that I have sometimes, and frankly, when, as a person who can be overly sensitive sometimes, some of what I see in the news these days just really does hurt my heart. And so sometimes I'll have a tendency to kind of try to shield myself. And I don't think that's the right approach to this either. But how do we handle those hurt feelings that we have when we really do see something that strikes at the core of our being, and yet, just turning it off isn't the right answer? What's the right step to take?
Oh, it's a good question, because headlines are a natural part of the business model for newspapers, not just recently, but in the past, and certainly, obviously, for the starts of TV shows and radio shows and everything, too. So, headlines are going to, unfortunately, or whatever, they're going to emphasize maybe the more negative point. They're going to emphasize one particular part of a story, one particular moment in a person's life, and they're going to go for a label or a very easily memorable piece of bait, as it were, that's going to make you pick up that newspaper or spend some time in engagement online. And that's no way to handle the news. It can be fun and appropriate in some cases, because how else can we really handle that fire hose of information coming at us all the time if we don't occasionally shrink it down to bite size? But there's so much more. We live in an information-rich age. And we should remember that the headlines are just the beginning, and they might not even be just the beginning. And the headlines are often telling us about one particularly bad aspect of a circumstance or of a person's life, and that's when the Catholic faith, I think, can really come in and give us a good backstop against instant reactions to headlines, and say, well, maybe this headline is absolutely true, but is it Is it the whole story? Does it capture the whole life of a person? Because we know that God's working throughout the whole life of a person, and that conditions and circumstances and developments in the news, there are so many variables in the equation, so many of which through God can work at any moment, and that many people are working through. We have to be very careful of headlines that oversimplify.
Well, I love that wisdom, and I think it's indicative of what folks will find when they check out this great book, When Headlines Hurt. And one thing that struck me when you're speaking is one of my very simple-minded spiritual practices that I often use in my own life. I have a little Hail Mary rule for myself, and I use it a lot on social media when I see things that are what I consider to be inflammatory, that may leave me feeling like the snark is rising up within me, and I'm going to have the perfect comment just to take that writer down. But then I make myself actually stop before I type anything and pray a Hail Mary, and sometimes 2 or 3, and then usually the snarky temptation will leave me and move along.
That is brilliant. Don't you wish that more people did that before they wrote their next tweet?
Well, I can think of a few that I'd like to recommend it to. Maybe I'll just send them a little holy card. So, well, Bill, I'm so grateful for your time today. I do want to recommend that people head over to your website at onword.net for your personal blog and more information about the great work that you're doing. And really, folks, definitely check out this great book. It's a quick but important read. When Headlines Hurt, Do We Have a Prayer? By Bill Schmitt. Bill, any closing thoughts before we let you get back to your communicating?
Other than just the phonetic warning that to ask people to remember that I've intentionally misspelled that word in my URL, so it's onword.net, and hopefully they'll take a look at some of the other blogs I've been writing. They include things that I was writing back during my Notre Dame days, etc. And then I do hope that I hope that the audience for this book will wind up being news consumers and news producers, as it were, and everybody in between. Because, as we say, we're all kind of in the marketplace, but we tend to be loners in the marketplace. So the key to the book and the key to Pope Francis's message and prayer are that, hey, let's pray about this together, and then let's act on this together. So if my book can have a little bit of impact along those lines, then it'll all be worthwhile.
Well, I think it is. It's a small investment with a big payoff, Bill. So thank you for that, and for all the great work that you continue to do, and especially for the gift of your friendship.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way, and thank you for all you do. You've been an inspiration to me as I've entered this third phase of communication to say, hey, the writing of old style press releases isn't the be all and end all of a modern communicator's career, and so you've launched me into podcasting and ebook writing and different things like that. You're one of the great inspiring pioneers in Catholic media. So thanks, and please keep up that. Good work.
Watch out, Bill. Pioneers get their boots dirty. So.
Well, we'll let Pope Francis continue some pioneering messaging too.
Well, thank you so much to our guest, Bill Schmitt. Again, that website is onword, onword.net, and the name of the book is When Headlines Hurt. You can check that out at Amazon. Friends, that is it for this week's show. I'm so grateful to you for tuning in. I do hope that if you're enjoying the podcast, that you'll leave us a review over at iTunes. I'm always welcoming your feedback. You can drop that in an email to Lisa at CatholicMom.com, or just find me on social media, just about anywhere at Lisa Hendey. Until next week, I hope you have a fantastic week, friends. God bless.
Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by...
We want to help others, especially in places of strife, such as the Holy Land, where Christianity is dwindling by the day. But how to help? Here's an easy way: buying products through the Holy Land gift shop. Every product you purchase at myfriendsiskin.org/shop helps Christians support their families and stay in the Holy Land. Olive wood, embroidery, spices, and many more authentic products from the Holy Land are available right now at myfriendsiskin.org/shop. The Holy Land Gift Shop, bringing the Holy Land home.
Thank you for listening to Breadbox Media. Find more about us at breadboxmedia.com.